you think I'm in China? Actually not. I'm in a suburb of Sydney, Eastwood, even 8,000 kilometers far away from the Chinese mainland. It still looks and feels like in China. When talking about China, one of the first things that comes to mind must be food. Peking ducks, Sichuan spicy hot pot, Cantonese barbecue. It's really hard to refuse so many tempting tastes. The Mid-Autumn Festival is one of the most important festivals in Chinese culture. People celebrate in the street by day and enjoy family time at dinner.
Hi, my name's Rodney. I'm from the Chinese Masonic Society. We're here in Chinatown for the August Moon Festival. Part of the celebrations of August Moon Festival is the wonderful lion dance performance that we do through the town. And we go to all of the shops, take our red pockets, and it brings a wonderful crowd.
The Chinese have been in Australia since the 1840s. This is Sydney's Chinese Story, an exhibition of Sydney Living Museum. This rare achievement reveals the Chinese as gold miners, market gardeners and hawkers, cabinet makers and neighbors.
I very much appreciate the fact that Chinese have a very long and very dynamic, rich culture. The custom, the tradition is so vibrant.
So it's that sort of sense of being connected to a group of people, the history, and of course the culture itself.
I see myself very much as an Australian. I'm a Chinese Australian, with Australia being the proper noun and Chinese being the adjective.
I have very big influence by Chinese traditional art and literature.
Well, both grandparents came out in 1860. Of course, the new gold mountain, to find their fortune. Neither of them did that, but one was a journalist and one went into market gardening.
This Fujian family migrated here 10 years ago. Tony Wang and Lisa Huang have 3 children, and all they were born in Australia. Daughter Ziting is 8 years old. Crystal is 3, and son Fortune is only 11 months. Ziting goes to school, but Crystal and the son Fortune stay at home. Sometimes a babysitter helps to look after 2 babies, because Tony works for himself as a builder, at least 5 days a week. Lisa is a hairdresser, works 3 days a week. At home, the family relaxes together, and dinners are often shared with good friends. But in the home, this family still insists on the traditional Chinese values, like children honoring and respecting their elders.
我今年19岁，我学校是住的 Hurstville Public School， 我有弟弟妹妹，我爸爸妈妈都去上班。
你叫什么名字？
我叫文静，然后英文名字是叫温静，然后中文名字是叫王子婷。 我的家是住在Hillsview Road。
妈妈叫你从门口扫进来的。
你最好不要把我放在网络上啊。
Every person holds different purposes when being asked why they come to Australia.
因为我们家里兄弟姐妹都在这里嘛。
都在这里。你们喜欢这里的是哪个方面？可以说一下吗？
我觉得主要小孩子教育好。因为别个别人看冇事。
Before I ask the questions, what is the biggest problem so far? I guess I know the answer.
总的来说是英文了。
英文。
还好，现在银行什么都有中国人了。
可能因为看到这个啊。
主要不填表格就好。
还行，现在习惯了。
In Tony's view, Chinese is not a group which racism is mostly taking place.
像我们这人像会被人歧视的样子吗？就别人应该也不知道。
你就觉得澳洲是一个比较容纳性比较强的社会，是不是？
这样。
那我很少。
对呀。
我们确实没什么这个。
我现在在帮我弟弟、我妹妹在吃饭，
有一次我去商场去买奶粉，然后正好旁边有一个鬼佬妈妈，她看到我在买奶粉，然后她就质问我说：“为什么你们要买那么多奶粉，然后要往中国邮寄？难道你们中国人没有奶粉吗？”然后其实她问到我，然后我也很难回答，但是我能感觉到她对我的一个态度的一个不满。
多一单，我想问主干了，主干了，你帮我怎么说哟？我来抽烟。
你们来这边多久来了？我靠！
来了7、8年。
7、8年。对。你们为什么会选择来这边呢？
因为我要来读书啊，家里人建议我过来这边，教育比较好。
这里工资高啊，工作挺好的。
日常生活里面会不会还有就是中国的元素在里面？
会啊。
肯定会啊。
比如呢？
例如，我们租房子会跟中国人住一起呀，然后喜欢吃中国餐呐，家里也会做中国的东西，就自己做呀，也是做中餐呀，然后。还有呢？
我是一个我是来自马来西亚的一个华人，我的祖籍是中国汕头。我为什么会选择来到澳大利亚？是因为我觉得在这个时候，在同年龄，在马来西亚学历低的话，会找的工作会比较没那么理想，相对这边。对这边的要求，学历要求没那么高，工资也比较满意。如果说在马来西亚，在大学毕业出来，未必会找到一份这么好的工资，所以我才会选择来澳大利亚。
我来这边已经3年了，因为一是在国内已经退休了，再一个我的女儿在这边生了孩子，我要过来帮他们带孩子。对，广场舞现在对于中国的 50岁到60岁左右的人群来说，确实是一个很流行的一件事情。我们通常情况下是用广场舞来做锻炼，然后顺便来结交一下朋友。那来到澳洲了以后，因为时间会更充裕，尤其是早晨，随着年龄变大，不会起得很晚。这样的话，大家聚集在一起，一是也是为了锻炼身体，再一个在澳洲这边还可以就是认识更多的朋友，也对我们来说是一个解闷儿的方法。
University of Sydney academic Dr. Minglu Chen is a lecturer in the China Study Center and Government and International Relations.
I think to talk about why the Chinese culture has been reserved so well in Australia, I think it's a comparative idea, right? You compare it with probably European migrants and how they interact with Australians and the Australian culture. My thinking is that because the Chinese culture is different from this Anglo-Saxon culture that the majority of Australians hold. So people eat very different food. The two languages, English and Chinese, are very different. It's not like French and English, German and English. They all share more or less similar kind of vocabularies or linguistic compartments. The Chinese language is so different. The Chinese food is very different. The Chinese culture, in a way that it emphasizes so much on family values rather than individual values, is also very different from the Australians. And also for those who migrated recently from mainland China, they also have experienced a very different political history, as you like, because people who were born in the 1970s or earlier, they had all gone through the period of socialist construction under the Communist Party, which is very different from what people here have experienced before, between the years of 1949 and 1980s. So in that way, I think it is almost invariable that the Chinese would behave, they would interact, they would think in a quite distinctive way.
Dr. Chen says, today's Chinese culture not only remains strong, but is still being embraced by white Australians.
What I can recall is beginning of this year, the first day of the Lunar Chinese New Year, one of the best-selling Australian mainstream newspapers, the Sydney Morning Herald, first time printed its title in Chinese. So instead of Sydney Morning Herald, there were together with Sydney Morning Herald, there were the characters 悉尼先驱晨报 printed at the same time as well. And on the first page of this very newspaper of that specific issue, there was a logo of the Chinese New Year, the year of the goat sign. There were also there was one cover story of how the Australians celebrated the Chinese New Year. So that is a very positive, and to many Chinese, I guess that was a kind of a quite remarkable gesture from the Australian society. I remember I rushed to buy that issue of that newspaper. It sold out so quickly. I was lucky to grab one of the very last copies. But also on the same issue of that newspaper, there were stories about how the Chinese investors have boosted the property market so high and made it kind of affordable for the local Australians. And also the same issue of Sydney Morning Herald also made a story about the concentration of Sydney population of Chinese background, and they showed it on the map. So what kind of message it sends, I think, is quite representative and typical, which is the rise of China brings with itself the same time opportunities as well as to, I guess, at least some people in this society, maybe something like a threat. Also recently, I don't know whether you have been following this, there was this guy who was the self-declared leader of a not yet registered political party called Party of Freedom, who sent out pamphlets in the lower North Shore and in the West areas, trying to convince the local Australian residents to get together and start a petition against the Chinese property buyers who made the Australian property really affordable for the Australians. So clearly that is a good example of at least a very small group of this society who sees the Chinese and maybe the rising China and Chinese culture as a threat.
之前有遇到过一次，也是自己的一个个人经历，在一个食品店去买吃的，然后排了很多的人，他的那个店员会先去 serve 一下他们 local 的 customer， 就是他们当地的白人，然后对于像一些亚洲人，他们会就是不是很会理会，哪怕你去跟他说不好意思打扰一下，我想要这个，然后他们也不会就是说抬眼去看你啊，我觉得这个可能对于亚洲人来说也算是一种不平等的待遇，因为反正自己作为亚洲人的我自己心里面会感觉怪怪的，感觉没有被重视到。
So culture and cultural background is a very important part of an identity. So even though having migrated to Australia for a long time, to be able to hold on to a very different culture, to celebrate the very exciting part of this culture, food, traditional festival celebrations and language, I think is a very important part of these people's identity, which they are, I think, quite proud of, as far as I can tell.
Helen Chang is a fourth-generation Tasmanian Chinese whose maternal great-grandfather came to Australia in the 1880s. She was the first non-white reporter employed by the ABC, and the first female correspondent. She reported from Beijing between 1983 to 1986. When I first met her in Melbourne, she was wearing a red coat. In Chinese culture, red means good luck and happiness.
When I arrived, the Chinese dreamt of the 4 things that go round: a bicycle, a watch, a fan, and a sewing machine. By the end of my posting in 1986, they aspired to the 4 big things: a cassette recorder, a television set, a refrigerator, and a washing machine.
Helen says now the Chinese all have those luxuries and their priorities have changed.
They are their own apartment, a car, private education, and travel overseas, and private education, and maybe a pet pooch and a concubine too. So that is how China has dramatically changed.
But even though she has Chinese ancestry, Helen says she did not always feel Chinese while working in China.
The sources were very sparse indeed. You couldn't talk to Chinese people, really, because it was a form of apartheid. Chinese were in fact not allowed to enter our apartments. If they did, they had to sign a book, put down their name, and they could be in big trouble if they came too often. Now, the sources were official. The Chinese official Xinhua Newswire, which told you that this plant or that plant had a better production quota. Then there was a briefing once a fortnight. You could ask questions and you'll be told, we take note of your question.
Like a banana, I deceived. My Asian body masked my Western soul. My yellow skin had to be peeled back before anyone could taste my white flesh. This is Annie Shan Wu. In the Australian media, it's not hard to miss her. She is a prominent figure, particularly in theatre, as well as television, film, and radio.
Well, my Chinese ancestry is important because it's a part of who I am. And so I think I'm a combination of factors of many different influences, and that's one of the most important ones. My great-grandfather came to Australia in 1878. He came from Guangdong province in southern China to Darwin in the Northern Territory to set up a shop. So I think the reason he came was he could see that there was a possibility for business to make money for his family.
She was born in Cairns, Queensland of Chinese ancestry. The same as Helene, her family has been here since 1878. Interestingly, her real family name is Sun. Shan Wu was followed by her great-grandfather's shop's name.
Chinese culture is part of who I am, but it's not everything about who I am. I mean, I was born in Australia, I grew up here, all my education is English education through Australian schools. So I have many different influences in my life. So I guess the Chinese culture is there, it's intrinsically there, but it's a mixture I'm a mixture of many different things, and I think that's the contemporary state of being for many modern day Australians. For the Chinese, culture is very, very important, and family is very, very important. And I think that it's all, wrapped up together so that you like to keep those connections with what you know, and it is a very important part of many people's identity.
Many of Annie's products are about Asian, specifically about Chinese, such as I Am a Camera and China Heart.
Hi, I'm Annette Shan Wu. Come and see Stories East and West at the Zenith Theatre in Chatswood. We're on from the 6th to the 8th of September.
Chinese have been here for a long time, and sure, more and more Chinese are coming. Culture, same as black eyes and yellow skin, would be memorized in Australia forever.